sessions will happen as and then from Thursday we return to it. Powercut is a scheduled work for some replacement of the transformer. So today we have a presentation by Dr. Jayant Singh, then tea break, then discussion hour. Professor Jayant will also introduce our high performance computing facility, which in a way is unique. You may know the history of computer science and computer education is very closely connected to IIT Kanpur. In that respect, high performance computing is an evolution. So after the discussion hour, the bus will take you to the HPC facility where again Dr. Jayant will show you around. And then after that, the bus will drop you in the guest house. Several plans. Yes, sir. So the way I say it, Jayant, is you are a PhD from University of Buffalo, but more importantly, you are a BTech of IIT Kanpur. He works on a variety of applications: nano tribology, micro nano devices, crystallization, etc. With molecular dynamic simulation. It's a very extensive kind of simulation. It's at the core of it. So, he's a recipient of several awards. Member of the editorial board of ACS Omega. He is a chair professor at IIT Kanpur. He was a JSPS invited fellow some time ago. Research fellow via the Humboldt Research Foundation in Germany, and many more. This talk is on a very intriguingly worded subject called the Fourth Industrial Revolution. He'll tell us more about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Can you hear me? Yeah. So, well, he asked me to give a talk on fourth industrial revolution, and I thought actually I would be kind of able to talk more deeply in. But when I started looking into the data and started looking into the literature report, I realized it's not much of what I do at all. It's much about how we have come to this stage, and rather telling what we need to do, it's also important to understand from where we have come. What are the situations and where particularly India has fared in the third revolutions and what India should do. At least we can discuss about it. Now, so as you know, IT Company is a very vibrant community. There are a lot of voices, and we talk about leadership in terms of how to lead the department or institute. And we often get emails from our own colleagues. Look at this video and so forth. And when Professor Muralidhar messaged this particular program to the community, one of the video which was shared by General Sam Manager, basically who led to the war against Pakistan, 1971. So I was going through the video, and one of the things he was giving this lecture in one of the colleges, and he was talking about his own experience. And he said that for being a leader, what is most important is professional knowledge and competence. Now, if we want to really get to the point of handling subjects which are outside our domain, okay, it's important to also get to the history of it. So I'm not an expert. Let me just, I'm really an expert in terms of leadership and so forth. I'm in the same boat, perhaps much younger than where you are. My intention of this particular talk is, subject is to give some insight to the data. Okay, and that is how I shaped this particular presentation. And hopefully you will see what I've seen, that there is much to do as we as a community in order to enrich our department or our current activities, how to shape it up. So as I said, I haven't written any report as of now, besides my, of course, academic interest. But a lot of data which I've taken is from World Economic Forum report, which is extensively looking into this industrialization, particularly 4.0. What is 4.0? We'll just look into that. Some of the definitions I've taken in Wikipedia rather than speaking directly from my experience. The reports on robotics, okay, which is essentially related to third revolution, and some of the data of history of computing and some top 500 and other data. And some of the videos I'm going to use it in order to illustrate the view or visions from the companies which are working on various different aspects of Industry 4.0. Okay, so this is how I've tried to outline the talk, just to give a bit of background of industrial revolution and particularly how education has been kind of partnering the technological impact on the GDP in order to show that. We'll take an example of IT industry, where it's very incidental, or rather it was politically or judicious thoughts were together making an impact, particularly in IT industry, particular service. And then the subject of scientific and high performance computing. There the HPC and supercomputing aspects of India, and give an example of IT council. And the question or the subject, how best to prepare for this fourth industrial revolution. That is where we have to brainstorm it. And this is what the discussion hour will be also. I will try to ask questions rather than tell solution. So because solution has to come after mutual discussions here. Okay, so let me just start with a quick recap of industrial revolution. Now, any revolution, particularly industry, has to be related to some changes in the way we live, which is related to the goods and services. So the definition particularly is relevant to say in this way, that is fundamental change in the methodology or the way in which goods and services are being produced, delivered and consumed. So if you look at the history of our civilization, it's always related to goods and services, food and the way we live. And how do we produce, how do we deliver, how do we consume? So the technological development is part of it, and hence all this different era where the technological revolution has come is mainly because of the introductions of new technologies. Okay, so the big changes are there, and something which of course you are all aware of. So I'm just bringing the topic so that we are on the same platform. The first industrial revolution was basically the concept of, mainly driven by the heat thermodynamics. Okay, the work, okay, the heat generation, work generation from the heat, and the steam power, vessel power, engines. But the main thing which led to the concept of mechanization, which essentially changed the whole life of, particularly in England, this was happening, was kind of mechanical ways of doing things. And this was first realized in the industries such as cotton industry. Okay, so this is an example of first mechanical loom in 1785. And of course, this went on to the different industries such as coal, iron, road, and textile. Now, this led to the concept of factory. before there, the factory was not, particularly the concept factories was not there. So England completely got first big change in the lifestyles by this particular introduction of mechanization. Okay, and you can see, I mean, I don't know whether you are able to see the images very well, but these are the images which I have taken from different reports, and these are the first set of mechanization of making clothes, basically. Okay. Now this allowed a lot of people to move from the agriculture to the factories. That was a change in the England. So this went up to 18th century and start of the 20th century. The second industrial revolution was prompted by the transformation of harnessing the concept of electricity. Yes. Okay. So the electricity was the main origin of the second industrial revolution. So this went into many different aspects of industry, chemicals and petroleum, which was of course one of the part of it. This is the BASF is a famous polymer company based in Germany. That's a schematic or the kind of a drawing of that. That was in 1880. Made use of electricity to automate things, and then the concept of assembly lines came into it. Mass productions of particularly the automobiles. So this made a big change in the whole. So it's a big era from 1800s till late 20th century. So this is the Ford which actually introduced the assembly line in 1913. Okay, and this is a simple chassis assembly line. What you can see here. Now there was no robots that time, so laborers were involved in making things. Okay. And of course it was time consuming, labor intensive, but still it was in assembly line. There was a production which was more valuable from that point of view. Now India, of course, at that time was completely out of the sync. We were fighting each other under the rules of British, absolutely gone. So we never made use of the first, second assembly lines or first, second industrial revolution at that time. So our GDP also went down drastically because of lack of the involvement of such technological revolution. Okay, and the third one, which of course we are undergoing at this point, and about to reach the fourth, which people say is already there, is when the first programmable logic controller was introduced. So logic controller. So of course before 1969, the computers were already in place, right? But it was more like analog. Okay, so digital came little later, but this is a programming logic. So all the logics were put it into chips, ICs. Okay, and that completely changed the whole way we work. So all the assembly lines which you saw where people were standing, there was a possibility of replacing the people by robots. The frequency at which they can work enhanced many things. Okay, and I'm personally seeing some of these factories. Okay, the Mercedes Benz, and in Germany, if you just go there, you'll be amazed to see the rate at which they produce, they add their components. Amazing. So this is the era which we are living in 1970s till today, they say. And with the improvements in electronics and digital IT, further automation has happened, leading to more smarter robots. Now the same assembly line now looks like this. Okay, so earlier you will see that this hundreds of people were there replaced by 1 or 2 or 3 managers, one controller check, and the rest of the robots. Okay, so this is the President's assembly plant in Sterling. It's complete robots, and I don't know whether you can see this, but you hardly see any people there. So everything is robotized. Okay, with this, of course the employment has gone down. There was a lot of argument at that time, particularly in India, that the government policy has to support. But there, they thought about the production with the profit available in terms of selling it outside. So the rate at which they're producing was far more than what they could be produced by employment of men. So essentially, the government policy promoted in the Western countries pretty much. And the fourth, the topic which we will be discussing in the later part, is the concept of merging of digital and physical system. So digital is internet and so forth. Physical means basically now you can connect that to the devices, you can locate everything. So in this you have this virtualization, big data, Internet of Things, automated information leading to some kind of a controlled traffic. And I'm going to discuss this much later. Okay. So this is something which requires a bit more thing. So what I thought is that let me first ask this question. I mean, the important is basically is being emphasized before I go to the next part, that the current technologies which are available appears to be better positioned in order to have machines, computer systems integrated with variety of things which we see, including our body, and that makes it absolutely necessary that we cannot avoid now to be not part of this particular program. And the history tells us that if we are not part of the industrial revolutions, the GDP is going to get affected. Our lives are going to get affected. We will be dependent on more developed countries. So we'll discuss this part. But the question is, how did we fare in the third one? And we know about the first and second. But what about the robotics? I mean, we were pretty good in some part of it, but we failed in the other part of it. So this is something which we have to ponder about and something to get ourselves aware. So I'm not going to tell something on my own, so I'm going to use the data directly from the robotics reports. So the number of installed industrial robots per 10,000 employees. Okay, this is for variety of different countries. Okay, including the Asians as well as developed countries. So this is the report of 2007 from IFR World Report, and you can see the average is around 85 per 10,000 employees. Okay, and you don't see India at all. Republic of Korea, basically South Korea, is 710, highly automated, and Germany should be here. And I was attending one of these Humboldt conference, and there somebody was there, and their target is actually to, I mean, what they see is completely different world there. That they are looking for like 10 times of this in 10 years down the line. Okay, and of course they are worried about this neighborhood issues, but it's inherently integrated with the profitability or the GDP growth, it seems, from their point of view. Now, even the Asian countries, you know, Singapore is of course very high. Even China, which we of course compare, is 97. Okay, and I'm going to touch upon the China a bit more. Our number is 3. That's the number, 3 per 10,000. That's the number at this point. Okay. Here is the estimated annual worldwide supply of industrial robots. Now this industry is all across industry. Okay. So I'm going to put also categories. Now this is the growth. It's like 14% on an average. Okay. From 2009 there were 60 worldwide per 60,000 of units, and now this is 2021 is estimated to be 630,000 of units. Most of the automated part is done in automobiles. Okay, so you can see automotives here. It's growing. Last year it grew by 22%. Electrical and electronics is significant, 33%. Metals, plastics and chemical products, food and beverages, others are unspecified. So chemical industry and food industries are not so much yet automated as far as the robots are concerned. They are automated in different form, but they are not using the robots as such. But other units are pretty much done by that. Now, which was the largest contributor as far as the market is concerned? China here. This is the estimated worldwide annual supply of industrial robots is 1,337.9 percentile thousands of units. Remarkably huge. And India is 3.4. You can see where our own neighbors are going, particularly China. Okay, and this is something which and this is 2008, and so we are just stuck with that. Our thought process that, okay, if you automate things, it's going to affect the neighbors. What are you going to do with that? So it appears more about political decision, but there are other issues also. Now, this is the total sales by country. Of course, China was number one, Japan, Republic Korea, all Asian countries. And then you have US and Germany. So, these 5 countries represent 73% of total sales in 2017. That's the number we have. Now this brings us to the point that why India, particularly, were not in that leap of, or in the sense why India was left behind in this automation. I mean, this is a question to think about it. There must be a reason behind it. Now, when I was trying to see that, okay, if you have some industrial need, automatically the education starts pumping in somewhere. The courses start tuning in somewhere. So, what about the number of robotics discipline or interdisciplinary department across India? How many are there? And unfortunately, I was not able to find it out. I mean, there are courses which are coming up in the last 5 years, but they are not independent discipline. So, as robotics is multidisciplinary, it requires a lot of different expertise, right? And very few couple of IITs, okay, I mean, it's not in existence. So, there is no department of robotics as such. Okay. So, that was a hurdle. The other thing is that not many people, many faculties are there. So, I was also looking at like who are the experts in robotics across IITs, and I found there's very little who was bread and butter, and all research was in this direction. So, and then number of colleges, number of departments is hardly any. In fact, IIT Kanpur established the Center for Robotics in 1999. That itself tells that industry never demanded it from India. And there was no requirement of robotics expertise from India to US or to Germany. So that is, they were self-sufficient in some sense. And of course, the growth rate is not exponential, as in the case was IT industry, which we will see. And that led to that something was missing. I mean, there was no brainstorming or no thought process was going on here. In addition, there was no, I mean, there are hardly any industry which caters to the development of these robots. Now, at this point, we import robots. All the ones which I have said are basically the one are getting imported from the rest of the world. So, we depend on countries like China, USA and Europe to procure necessary component, and this is also becoming a stumbling block for our growth in automation, which is necessary in certain particular industries. So it's clear that the policy as such, because government policies are basically nothing but a catalyst to support various different growth as far as certain industry is concerned. But in addition to that, industry have not also shown any interest. Now people have started thinking, and if you look at particularly automobile industry, there is some sign of growth, some sign of interest from that. So this is what I feel, that while the policy may not have supported the growth of automation, neither industry have shown serious interest, and this is of course reflected in the number of disciplines and the students which are graduating from there. Well, if you look at sports festival or in general technical festival particularly, you will see that the most attractive event would be the robots fighting each other or playing a football game. But somehow it's not translated to the industrial businesses which they are looking into that. But perhaps is because all this thing has happened in the last 6-7 years, so maybe the results may be in a decade we will be able to see that. But the other thing which I feel very strongly, that the lack of academia industry collaboration is basically also a stumbling block in the development of this. Okay, because you really need faculties to spend time on it in order to solve that problem. Until you give the problem, they cannot just come up with some kind of a robot or some kind of mechanization which can solve certain aspects of industry. Okay, so now it was not that the talent was not there. Okay. it was not there that people could not solve or get into that. Something is amiss that possibly, sometimes education institute may have to think on their own. They can become the catalyst and industry can come. This is something which we can see in Western countries. Okay, and this is an example which will take the IT industry as an example to talk about how educational system or higher education became the genesis for new industries. Right? In fact, usually that's the case. So, in the case of robotics in India, there is a lack of push from the education system as well as from the industry. So both are equally guilty as far as not development of the robotics. But let me just talk about this IT industry, and then we can go to the next part. Now this is, since we are talking about IT industry, it's important to also give a background of this origin of computers. So I was just thinking that just give you a brief overview, and I'm not sure how many people are completely aware of it. So I won't go to the details of it, and just see the very key aspects of the inventions or the major technological developments here. So I'll start with Alan Turing. Okay, if you maybe heard of his name. Now he says that a computer would deserve to be called intelligent if it could deceive a human into believing that it was a human. So Turing was the first person actually who thought of creating such a machine which can deceive human. He was a mathematician, English mathematician, cryptanalyst, and is also called the father of computers or computing. Okay, so what he did is he came up with the concept of Turing machine, okay, which became the foundation of computers in 1936. So his machine was basically nothing but printing some symbols with certain set of logics, okay, as if a human would do that on a piece of some papers. Let's assume that, and the concept of the logic becomes the foundation of computing. Okay, so that is 1936. Okay, that is the computing. But in fact, if you go back to the much earlier, there is analog computing was there, a basic computing. Like in the Chinese have made this abacus which you can calculate, right? The simple logics or mechanical ways of was already developed much earlier. So Charles Babbage, was considered to be the one who conceptualizes the automatic computing engine. It was mainly mechanical way of computing things. Okay. Then, of course, there's a lot of development later, but I brought about this name, Konrad Zuse, and he came up with the Z1, the first programmable electromechanical programming computer. At that time, electricity was already in place, so people were thinking to make use of that. Now, Konrad, he was a German. Okay, the later version of Z1, Z3, was given to the German. Okay, so around the World War II, this was all happening. Okay, so already Anand was talking about that. I thought this is an interesting aspect to introduce here. So, in order to get really decode messages which were given, all these programmable computers in Germany, the Colossal was developed in England, okay, which purpose was to decode the messages. That was 1943. Okay. Now I skipped a lot in between because there was a lot of other people who should be named in the development of this history. But then this is the important part. So this actually, if you go to if you read the second, the fifth standard book. In fact, I remember my son was reading and I saw this particular name. So they are given this particular introduction of computer. This is that ENAP, okay, which later become NANEP or MANIAC, what you can pronounce, was actually the major change. This is called. The name is very interesting. is Electronic Numerical Integrated and Computer. Okay, ENAC. So 1936, okay, was developed in Pennsylvania, University of Pennsylvania. It had huge, space it was occupying. It was 1800 square feet, and it was 20,000 vacuum pumps were used. The question is why vacuum pumps? Imagine vacuum pumps was basically it was acting like a switch. It was like a switch, and hence all the calculations can be done. Of course, later on it was replaced by resistors. But 20,000. Now I hope that I have the image for you. Maybe I should show the image. Okay, maybe later here. Okay, so after ENAC, there was and ENAC actually mainly was used in later on to calculate nuclear fission reactions. And subsequently, around 1940s, the MANIC was introduced. Okay, and I will talk about Enrico Fermi and other scientists who actually made use of this in order to do simple calculations. 1950, UNIVAC was delivered to US government. This was the first mainframe, large mainframe which has operating systems as well as memory. Now, ENAC, it has no operating system. Okay, nothing, no memory. So what do you do if you want to add something? You use punch. Punch pad and all the information. Punch pad, you read it and do the calculation later. So there is no more memory, there is no reprogram. You cannot reprogram anything. There is a later version of this which was used by some people in order to solve some. I will talk about that. It had possibility of reprogramming it. Okay. And after 50, the IBM introduced or invented the memory, the RAM. So, and then they had series of these machines. And of course, after that, the progress was very fast. So, because of the introduction of IC, integrated circuit, so basically the electronics was brought to the device directly, and now you have this IC which has replaced the vacuum pumps, and everything was compact. From 18,000 square feet, everything was small, compact, leading to MS-DOS, the operating system in 1980, which has led to the personal computer. Then the Apple Mac operating system 1984, which introduced this icon-driven interface. That led to the invention of the Windows operating system. And subsequently, there is no change as far as the personal computer is concerned. All the changes are there in supercomputing. Of course, the look and feels are different. Now you have iPad and all the flexible things. These are the physical way we do things. But otherwise, the computing concepts is still stuck since 90s. So this was one panel of ENIAC. Just one panel. Actually, this looks like this. This is ENIAC. Okay. So it's a huge machines occupying huge space, and it was said that when it was started in Pennsylvania, the lights were actually flickering for some time because it was using 180 kilowatts. That was the ENIAC machine. Okay, so what about India? So this was 1980, till 1950s things were pretty much okay. First computer in India was due to Professor Mahalanobis, who was a founder of ISI. Okay. So he founded in 1930s, but actually he got the first computer in 1956, and this is the name. This was from British. This was the British tabulating machines, just to tabulate things, the statistics. It's installed in India, and then he sent two faculties from the ISI to get trained. They stayed there for a couple of months. They came back, and then they started coursework to train a lot of people. They solved a lot of problems, but it was neighboring, like within Calcutta and neighboring. Around that same time, IIT Kanpur started thinking about getting a computer. So this was Jawaharlal Nehru opening up, and this is the team, and this is basically the panels here. Again, this was mainly for punch card based machines. Now, Kanpur apparently took the significant leap, and this is because of the CAD program. Okay. So I hope that you all know this is a Kanpur and American program, which was a consortium of 9 universities. And the major decision by this US visiting or the US faculties which came here as a part of this program was to install a computer. And that is the best thing they did, because that changed the whole way we started looking into, in terms of the programs. And this is very interesting, because while there is a lot of push for that, you can later on you will see that there was also resistance. So this was around 1963. IBM 1620 was a popular program, a popular computer used by many of the USA university. So this was imported with the help of funding from the international US agency. Now it had simple systems, 60,000 main memory, 3 tape drives, punch card reader and writer. The punch output as well as the program could have been, there was IBM accounting machine through which you can print. So, but it took, this is the image actually taken, I don't know whether you can see or not, but this is basically the machine taken by or carried by a bullock cart. Okay, that was a machine, and this is the computer center which you're going to see later part. Okay, so this was in 1963. What is interesting is that it was emphasized, the faculty from the US started emphasizing that teaching programming on this machine would be extremely important. And that is why I think that one of the major contributions is American faculty did, because they put us in the same league as they were in Princeton, okay, in other places. So we are not behind as far as the technology and the learning is concerned. So this was led by John Galbert, and basically once the Fortran compiler was installed, they were trained. Okay, the training was given by the IBM engineers to manage it, and they got to learn how to write programs. And this is where Professor Raja Raman, who was a pioneer in this, he led us to become the first fully functional computer science department in India. Okay, I will talk about a little more on that. So what CAB did is they sent 2 faculties here, okay, to educate the faculty and student of IIT Kanpur on this particular computer, because nobody knew how to use it, right? So IBM trained it to manage the computing machine, but how to write these codes. So as soon as the IBM 1620 started working, a 10-day intensive course was organized by them. And the important thing what they did was disseminate, not just to the IIT Kanpur faculty, but all across. So he took a proactive stage. Instead of restricting the course to IIT faculty, they invited scientists and engineers and the faculty members of other institutes in India to attend the course. And within a couple of years, 1,500 scientists were trained on this. Okay. Now this is something very interesting. So 1,500 scientists were there. They knew how to write programs in Fortran and run it. Okay. The other thing which was done is the Fortran programming and numerical method as a subject started emerging. Okay. And so around 1964, a compulsory course on the programming and a numerical method was introduced, and it was called Technical Art course. Now this is something very funny. So the name was Technical Art 306. Okay, and the reason was that people thought that computer is basically a tool in a workshop. So all our technical art basically meant for something like tool-based work, drawing and so forth. And it's not a science. That was a mental block. In a sense, they were not able to, digest that there's some big changes occurring, and there's a lot of resistance on that. Soon, the IBM 1620 was 24/7 was used all the time, and it was saturated. And ITK bought another machine, 7044, and followed by basically the government of India sponsor. No, American professors, they left by the time 1964 for political reasons, of course, at that time. Now, Dr. Rajaraman and his couple of friends or colleagues, they were of the opinion that now computer science must get separated from electrical engineering, because they were in part of electrical engineering to start with. Okay, and the proposal was sent in 1976. Okay, and they wanted a separate bachelor's in computer science. This was resisted by the people, of course, because there is a big change, and you have only limited seat, which was given to, of course, fixed by the NHRD. So essentially, the opinion was that it is simply a vocational course. It cannot be a separate bachelor's program. Around 1976, that is a complete change. It's like, it's very difficult to see that 30 years down the line why this becomes important. But they fought for it. The other departments reluctantly gave 2 to 3 seats each, and finally 26 were allocated. So, as Professor Anant was said, now if you believe in something, if you have passion, you need to be stubborn. And I think Dr. Rajaraman was one of them. And he made sure that it flourished. The first batch of students were admitted in the years 1978. And you can see that what is the scenario in India across institutes. Now, after this, what happened that IIT Madras also got their first IBM machine in 1973, and a lot of people who were with Dr. Rajaraman, they left to IIT Madras because they were close to home and they had the similar facility, but of course with the knowledge of what they've learned at the IIT campus. Now, Dr. Rajaraman left in 1982 and established SERC, which is a supercomputing education and research center at IISc Bangalore. So he was the founder of that, as separate. So that's a separate entity as far as the supercomputing is concerned. Okay. So I will talk about a little bit of that later, but I think it's also apt time to also talk about what happened to the industry around this time. So 1976, the education picked up in the computing part. Training was done much earlier. 1970s, people had knowledge how of Fortran programming, and TCS started thinking that can we make use of this technological revolution, and they established the first industry in this in 1967. The main purpose at that time was to have this punch card service through Tisco, and they were working for this inter-branch reconciliation system for the CBI, central bank. So that was the only punch card. Basically nothing but tabulating things. Okay. And later on, of course, so they started working on the development of the product. In 1975, they delivered electronic depository and trading system to a Swiss company. So that was the time. 1980, our first software research and development in India was established by an industry, and that is well known, TRDC, CC. And there at that time there was a lot of hurdles for this industry to grow because of the high import and export duties for that. And that's why the new computer policy was introduced, which relaxed the import and export tariff, and subsequently enormous growth is seen in this particular industry. So hence the policy becomes an important catalyst for the development of industry, and this in this case is world-class IT industry. And you can clearly see here the growth. I don't know whether you can see this number. It says it's close to 70% effectively annual growth. And this is the revenue generated by the Indian IT output and growth rates. Okay, and effectively, and CAGR is a 13.5, mainly driven by the IT industry and this business part here, business models and the software models. Now, this software part, if you look at it carefully, the software product, it was mainly earlier service department, but in the last 5 years, you see the product contribution is also increasing to the group, which is indicative of that how IT industry from a simple service BPOs is changing towards product development. Okay, this is something which is also given in a report of NASCOM, that how we should change or re-skill ourselves in order to cater to the need of the industry. Okay, so I will talk about some part of it, but now I think this is the time where I can bring in the scientific computing. So around this time when the industry is also changing in the product, changing the lives of others, in general, the way we deal with goods and services, the scientific community also got excited. Of course, it started with the scientific thing, after the growth of computers is concerned, but it allowed us to convert all the theories, all the algorithms into computer language, which was possible logically. So, transfer of theories into algorithms, and this introduction of CFDs. Of course, CFD can be, you can see the history of CFD, which is the computational fluid dynamics, is nothing but solving the Navier-Stokes equations. That was feasible because of the computer, which essentially led to all this weather forecast and so forth. Which means that we were able to handle large-scale simulations, which were feasible with the help of technologies. But what we are seeing is basically improvement in the predictions now. Now, simulating reactions, finding out the faults in the plants, leading to automation and chemical and other industries. This is because of this fact that every 2 years we are able to increase the number of transistors on the devices. Okay, of course, the technology is changing. Nowadays, Moore's law, which is basically states simply the fact that you can increase this number of transistors every 2 years by 2 times. It's a fairly, it's like a forecast. It's not like, there is no theory about it. It worked well till 2010 or so. After that, there is a struggle, and that's where the GPU has come into, which is a graphical physical unit, processor unit. But nevertheless, you can clearly see it's growing linearly in this dimension. But it has, the whole idea behind it is that the computing power is enhanced many times. One of the important things which has happened is, with the help of computer, we could see molecule levels, we could see electrons, we can calculate electronic properties, which essentially means we can explore the phenomena at quantum levels. Now, with the help of improved computing facility and power, things like material modeling and a drug discovery has become much more better. Even testing of theories we can do, something which we cannot even talk about it, we should be able to do. Quantum mechanical simulations, reaction rate, these are something which has become very common. And this is not very unusual now, but I remember when I came to IIT Kanpur first time, and I gave a talk, and I was working in General Motors at that time, after my PhD. And there, they wanted me to work on hydrogen storage. And this was 2004. Okay, and my PhD was in statistical mechanics, working on clusters of gases, how this leads to the property. Completely physics. I'm a chemical engineer. I'm working on physics. Universe doesn't have boundaries as such. So when I was presenting, nobody had any questions. So they could see that I could do computing in some form. Okay, and I could solve something which was unsolvable. I could introduce something new, which I did in my PhD. But then the question was that when I came into IIT Kanpur, that what you need, so you just need one PC, that should be okay. When I was trying to relate this here, in Buffalo, I was using 500 such computing, 500 completely dedicated to my work, and now you want me to give one PC. Okay, and that was notion here because there was no concept of high performance computing. There were only few people who were doing that. So it was a lot of shift in the thought process. Working in a high performance already, which is developed in the United States, and then coming here and working only on few machines. So you have to change the thought process of people. Like one of the major important thing was it consumes energy. Okay, and what you see is only the results on which is displayed. I mean, there is no translational aspect as such within the short time. Somebody can use it, somebody can later on demonstrate it, but to convince someone, it was very difficult. I will tell you about some stories when I will talk about the HPC of IIT Kanpur. Okay. So of course now we all know the weather forecast has improved. You know, IMD data are much better, and this has two components. One is of course the models. Okay, you need to improve the models, which means that instead of just solving this, the properties also are being captured very well, and of course that has led to better forecasting abilities. The other thing is automation of plants. Okay, now this kind of properties, which is necessary for materials for many things, was not feasible. Okay, so this is a mechanical property, the thermophysical property. Even if you talk about a simple thing such as what is the condition of a liquid in a given temperature and pressure, an arbitrary liquid, that was not feasible. 20 years back we would do that. But now it's like it's a half an hour job, even less than that, to find it out. This is something which is now feasible to calculate. It essentially means you can replace the experiments completely with simulations on any arbitrary systems. And this has helped in screening materials. Now, you'll be very surprised to know that the drugs, particularly how they get screened. So you don't need to do experiments. All these chemical compounds are now screened absolutely in simulations, and only few of them are conducted, mainly used to conduct some final experiments. So this kind of abilities has helped in order to expedite the processes here. So I will try to skip this part. Now this is something which basically what I want to try to do that is a simple thing such as Newton's equation of motion or Newton's law. It looks very simple, but when you apply it to calculate a property such as pressure of a given room containing so many molecules, it was impossible to do that a couple of years back. But now it's feasible because of the ability to construct the simulation techniques, okay, and to predict the properties. Now this was first done, again I go back to the computing part, in ENIAC, which I said that further was modified to MANIAC, and his first job was to perform the calculation of hydrogen, okay, which basically Professor Anand referred to that. Okay, and it took 60 days of processing to do this calculation, 1951. The good thing about all this work was inventions of new methods. So the Monte Carlo method was invented around this time. Okay, and this was by Fermi and Taylor, okay, which made it more much faster. But in addition to that, they also invented other things such as I will talk about this part. But they also invented something called equation of state. This was the first equation of state calculated for 2D system. Okay, it is using the same thing. So on one hand, they were trying to solve something, but they were also looking into the physics of atoms and molecules, and that becomes very exciting for scientists because they would like to now understand and maybe take it to the next stage. But this was a two-dimensional system. It was not even three-dimensional system. Now this was 1953 onwards. Okay, hundreds of molecules is feasible because of some people which invented the molecular dynamics. So this is the first work by Alder and Van Hart which developed the molecular dynamics. It's nothing but Newton equation of motions over time, so integrating systems. So if you look at it here, this paper came up in Journal of Chemical Physics in 1957. It says the method consists of solving exactly to the number of significant figures carried the simultaneous classical equation of motion, which is nothing but F is equal to nothing but of several hundreds of particles by means of fast electronic. So this was the first molecular dynamics which was introduced. The more important thing about this particular paper is that basically they also emphasize the importance of repulsive forces for solidification. Before that, there was a lot of argument whether repulsions are necessary for crystallization. So, of course, after these many things have happened. The first molecular dynamics for a molecular system, for particularly argon system, was done by an Indian, Rahman, is also called basically father of molecular dynamics. And then this Cray came into the picture. He brought into some new techniques, got into new computing abilities, and brought into this supercomputing era. Okay. Then Rahman and Stillinger, 1974, the first MD for water, followed by 1977 protein, and that led to this Nobel Prize in 2013. So this is the same guy who was first introduced the proteins, the model for the proteins. So in 30 years down the line, what he did was nothing but only proteins, develop the models of proteins, and this proteins, the model is called charm, and used by not just hundreds, thousands, lakhs of people around. So many people, it's like the most widely. That led to the Nobel Prize in this. So if you look at this, it's till 2007, there's exponential growth in this technique. Now if you compare CFDs or this techniques compared to the experimental methods, it's like 40 years versus 400 years. So these methods, what we are seeing, computation methods, is growing significantly in the last so many years. Now what we have is hierarchy of methods of different types. You can do electrons, you can do mid-level, you can do continuum, which means you can do fluids and so forth. So what is the concept now? That you want a device which should function as per your need. You can start from electrons and go to the exactly device level simulations. So this is called multi-scale simulations. There are platforms which are now being made. So companies are interested to have perfect answers with minimal errors, and from the electronic levels you can go to the devices, that means from electrons, atoms and molecules directly to the product. Now this concept is used not just necessarily for the electronic device industries, but as well as for petroleum industries. Okay. Now while this scientific growth was happening, this high performance computing also started around the same time when Cray introduced computer CDC 660 in 1964, where he replaced germanium, which was used earlier as a transistor, the first transistor, to silicon. And when he did that, it was feasible to further improve the computing, and the Fortran compiler for the machine was developed in Minnesota around this time, and this could perform 10 times more than the existing machines. The concept of 10 times became the definition of high performance computing. So by definition, if there is a machine which is 10 times the typical workstation, that becomes a supercomputer. That was a concept which was introduced. Okay. Now India's supercomputer program started in 1980s, when Cray supercomputer was denied because of the import ban, and the CDAC got started around that time, and the mandate was to build this one. They came up with the first pattern, Param 8000, which was 1991 indigenously built, and subsequently, of course, they are not building anything because they are more building the little part of it, just the network part. But earlier days they were actually able to do that. This is the growth here. Now the way it is defined supercomputing is called floating point operation. It's like number of operations you do per second. These operations are arithmetic operations, okay, addition, subtraction, and so forth. So based on the Moore's law, it's almost doubling every 2 years. That's what the idea is. But if you look at it here, this was something like 10 to the power 3 floating point operation. It's now in eta scale. Okay, 10 to the power 18 now. Around this time, the technology got changed, where the GPU and CPU combination came. This we call it accelerator. Okay. The graphics are basically used in that. Now, with the help of this, what we can do? Many things. is of course better weather and natural disaster, designing better materials, building efficient fuel cars, smart traffic management, discover fuel. I mean, this is something which is surprising. If you look at the industry, who are the big buyers of supercomputing facilities? Which company will be the buying the most? Oil industries. Oil and automobile industries, they spend a lot of money for this. When I was in General Motors, I had better facility than that particular Bangalore facility was more than all the facilities in academic in India at that time. And they have huge amount of spending on that. And the reason is that they're simulating things. So here they're spending massive things in order to search the new ones. They do subsurface simulation. Now, fighting diseases. Now, this is becoming a more important thing in today's world. And okay, IBM has just developed a cardioid, a code which provides an unprecedented depth of details of inner working of heart through a three-dimensional discrete model. I mean, these are the models which are coming up. So imagine now that you can just go there and essentially doctors have this code or something which is there on the devices. They can figure it out absolutely for you. This is what the future is. Now, this simulation provides a complete understanding of how the organ respond to various treatments. These insights could help shape the future, how doctors can treat the disease. Now, in addition to that, it has changed the way the biological, simulations work, or in general, how the biologists think about it. Now, this is 19,200 human protein structures. Okay, you can't see it, right? So I will just zoom with some part of it, and probably you will see the structures. So this is a part which I am zooming up. This is how it looks. Each of them are the protein structures. Okay, so this is visible. So they are all mapping up all the structures. Now, so today's time we don't know, but tomorrow in 10 years down the line, everything will be mapped essentially, and that becomes it's exciting and as well a bit scary as well, right? Now, along with this line, of course, to help the research and as well as the development, many different courses were introduced in the last 10 years. Okay, we all know mathematics and scientific computing, quantum chemical calculation is widely available now in all chemistry departments. Molecular simulation, mainly in India, it's in physics, but in engineering, of course, it has come. So when I came, of course, my first course which I introduced was molecular simulation. That time chemical engineering, perhaps I was the only one who did that, but now I see that many other part of IITs, they have now such courses. CFDs, parallel programming, this is something which is missing in terms of regular courses. This is as a part of the workshop people are offering, but it's not part of the regular course. Now, in addition to that, there are departments which has got established in recent years. Okay, such as scientific computing, information technology, mathematics and scientific computing, Department of Computation and Data Science. Now, you will find this kind of department in US and West widely available, but in India, Department of Computation and Data Science is only at IISc. They got just started in university.
Which place? Yes.
IISc Bangalore. So, University Pune also started something on data science, but this is the formal department which offers now masters and basically MTech and others. And we around if I recall, the first proposal was written in 2006 by Professor Biswas about having such department, who is currently the director of IIT Guwahati. And when I joined in 2005, the first thing was actually to revamp this whole exercise. And I recall that I still have the proposal that we have submitted to MHRD, and it took almost close to 5 years to get the proposal funded. Not 5 years, it's 10 years. But we could not get to the point where we can take it to the Senate and form it, because we need a lot of people to come together in order to have something, because this is an interdisciplinary department. So that's what the IC is doing. So essentially, they are getting people from polymer, who have computational background, from chemical engineers or mechanical engineers who have computational background, coming together. So they have domain knowledge and as well as some interface of data science. So this is something which we can discuss later also.
This is the ranking as of now. Okay, United States. This is the number of total number of gigaflops and number of systems which are in top 500. This is a ranking of supercomputing. So you can clearly see, so 171 such facilities are there for United States and China. Okay, and India is here. There are 5 in top 500 list. Okay. IIT Kanpur facility was also there in one. I think until last year it was still there in that one. But so I'll talk about now a bit of IIT Kanpur. So of course this was there. This story is already known to you, but my one main focus would be essentially the story of this. Okay, when in 2005 when I came, this was the machine which was available, the Linux cluster. So I asked my head of the department that I need machine to run. Those days the initial grant was given as 2 lakhs rupees as the initial grant. So I wrote, I need this much, at least 10 lakhs should be given. At least I can to run my simulations. Of course, since I'm in chemical engineering, my work was more on physics, and it was really physics and basically physical chemistry. It's really difficult to excite the students why I need statistical mechanics and equation of state clusters. So I thought about, okay, let me just look into the gas absorption abilities, which was relevant for industry. So coming from the industry, I thought this is something much more less computing intensive and as well as relevant for the industry. So I wrote the proposal, and I was very happy to get 10 lakhs because so the first grant which was more than 2 lakhs for a computational guy, theoretician, because they expected that you just need a computer, which is just 50,000 rupees. And this machine was not sufficient. So thankfully that time Professor Viswas and others, they already had this proposal with them. So I met them that we really need to make sure that our computing facility grow. They said, yes, we have done this exercise. We have sent to DST. Well, we will push it. So why don't you take up? You can just run around. So we'll provide all the support. So of course, they were very, very nice. A lot of ideas came. So we wrote the proposal and submitted to DST that time. And this was given as a special grant to someone. But around, so we wrote this around 2007 or 2008. We submitted to DST, and that time DST unit of nanoscience was just next door. That got inaugurated and was about to inaugurate. I was supposed to receive DST secretary that time, Ramasan. So I went to the Lucknow airport and I took the copy of proposal. And that 1.5 hours, I made use of 2 hours. I made use of it to explain why we need it. So he met Professor Ashutosh Sharma, who was basically the coordinator of DST, and then when he went back to Delhi, then he told Professor Sharma, there was a young guy who was very energetic. I really like this proposal. So we got lucky. I called for the presentation, and we wanted 20 crore, but they gave the DST gave 13 crore, and that was our basic jump start, which was HPC 2010. So everything has to be. See, this was something which was much simpler. It was a small cooling towers and things like cooling machines. Everything was very straightforward. You put a machine, put something, air conditioning, that should be okay. But for this, we have to really think how to make it, work like that. Completely different state-of-the-art data science, data storage, the UPS, and it was completely different for us because we are jumping from close to collectively the teraflop was 4 teraflop. The whole computing system in 2007 was 4 teraflop. From 4 teraflop we were jumping to 35 teraflop, almost like 10 times. It's a completely different problem. And around 2014 or 2013, we were funded by the institute itself, additional grant, and then we jumped from 350 to 360 And if you look at the ranking at that time when we got 2010, it was 369 ranking, okay, and that was if IIT Kanpur was actually in the top of this India as far as the academic institutes are concerned. And then we got 2013, collectively it was 180. And then the IC Bangalore got the Blue G, and now they're controlling the money as well for this NSN. Now, so what is the best thing of this? So even though 5-6 people collectively worked hard to get the machines, which was far more superior than what we had, the more important thing we thought about is that we cannot control the usage. We must make sure that it's available to all of the users. In spite of that, they are direct or indirect users. I mean, somebody who doesn't know programming, if they want to use this facility, we must become a facilitator to make use of that so that the facility can grow. From hardly 50-60 users initially in 2010, it went up to 600 users. That's the number we have as of October 2016. That's a huge number. I mean, and this year, what I did is I made the report of this. Of course, in the academic environment, we cannot force them to submit a report. So as of now, we made it so free. So whatever the collective report we got, it turned out that last year we had 20 PhDs which were graduated based on purely on this HPC facility, more than 120 publications, which is not, I mean, I think the number would be close to 200. It's just like I could not gather from all other people because of the time constraint. But that is something remarkable. Okay, all the MTechs and we don't charge anything. That's another important aspect. It's absolutely free from. Of course, now there is a lot of pressure because everything is now HEFA based, so we have to get some money from something. Okay, so around this time, when of course China was going up significantly, the NSN program around 2009 it started in terms of, and finally I think, around 2009 or 10 it was approved 5,000 crore. Later on it went up to 4,500 crore, and finally it got launched. Last year, the idea was that India should have national centers and the regional centers. So every part of this nation, there should be a big centers for supercomputing, just like a US model in general or Germany model. So IITs were given some tasks. IIC Bangalore is taking one part as a import-based machines. And CDAC would be one which assembling and kind of indigenizing thing. That's the concept behind it. Of course, we haven't received the first one. It's supposed to come next year. But the main issue in this whole discussion was that the industry demands 500 trained manpower on HPC. The question is, are we generating that many? The answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. The industry is taking care of that aspect, but academia is not actually formally training any students, as far as I know, on HPC. Okay. So that's another thing that we are short of that. So this is where it becomes important in this fourth industrialization. So I have now, I think 15-20 minutes and make use of this to explain what is 4I. Now with these changes in the technology, where we stand, what we have here. Now we have Sabbath systems which are now available. Now, which is basically that you have all the informations and devices connected. So now there was a report on the World Forum report by Klaus Schwab, who is the founder and executive chairman of World Economic Forum. It says that we stand on the brink of technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work and relate to one another. Now we cannot understand this until we see the impact by looking at some examples. It says that it is in scale, scope and complexity, the transformation will be unlike anything humankind has experienced before. Now that's something which experts are saying, that this is something going to change. So let me just quickly go through this what is the kind of definitions we have. So we have computing, storage, algorithms, communications, information, devices. This is something which we call the cyber systems. All right. Now it is going to affect the physical systems such as mechanical, automobile, for example, electrical, optical. Similarly, enterprise systems such as services, processes, business models, operating models. That means from the business perspective, if you think about it. Then you have this biological system, sensors in your body connecting every aspect of the functionalities, circulatory, nervous, muscular. These are all going to be connected in some form. And then you have the social systems, the governance, healthcare, education, and others. So it's going to affect every aspect of life we talk about. Okay. So they call it, the industry is calling this as an industry 4.0. Saying that you have cyber security, cloud computing, additive manufacturing, which is nothing but 3D modeling, 3D printing, based modeling, augmented reality, big data, autonomous robots, and the simulation system integration and so forth. So I think it's better that if we can just quickly go through the definition, and I will make use of these videos which are available in order to illustrate what we have. So what is a cloud computing? In fact, the classic example of cloud computing was done by a guy called Professor Pandey from Stanford. What he did is that this was around 2004. He got the idea that the CPUs which are ideal in different parts of the world, if they are connected to the internet, you can use bioinformatics and predict the structures of the biological protein. So he came up with this idea, and he was using this cloud-based computing to do this bioinformatics, and that became absolutely popular. Okay, and he is well known for that invention. But it has other applications, and basically cloud computing means that it's a shared pools of configuration computing system, resources, and high-level services that can be rapidly provisioned with minimal management effort, often over the internet. This was first demonstrated by Stanford for bioinformatics. And later on, I remember that during my PhD also we thought about this, and we made use of some aspect of it, but all the idea came from there. This augmented reality is nothing but basically enhanced virtual reality, nothing. And additive manufacturing is something which is coming up, that instead of taking an object and cutting it to and making it to manufacturing irrelevant, you start with the 3D printer, use of small object, and then you add it. Okay, that's the idea behind it. So it's like a bottom-up approach rather than the top-down. Okay, and with this, the expected thing is that it will have design flexibility, improved end product performance, reduced time to market, and overall extended product life. So this is the expected thing. So that means if it is done like this, you can automate also. A lot of things can be automated. Now, cyber security is nothing but the protection of internet-based connected devices. System integration is basically connecting the subcomponent of the system, which could be relevant for your plants. It could be your house also. Everything can be connected. And one of the videos will tell you how important that will become in future. And the big data in general, it means that you have a lot of data, and basically you are putting the analytics in order to extract the information out of it. Okay. So let me now make use of this.
Your next refrigerator may know more about your diet than your doctor. How many objects do you have that are connected to the internet? About a decade ago, you probably would have said one or maybe two if you were an early adopter of smartphone technology. But today, I've got a work computer, I've got a personal computer, I've got a tablet, I've got a smartphone, I've got a video game console, I've got a media player, I've got a smart TV, I even have a smart refrigerator. Now, extend this trend outward, and what do we get? Well, it's estimated by 2020 there will be 50 billion objects connected to the internet. Now that's billion with a B. It's also estimated by the US Census Bureau that there will be 7.6 billion people alive at that time. So that means that for every person there will be 6.6 objects connected to the internet. We're talking about a world blanketed with billions of sensors. These sensors are taking information from real physical objects that are in the world and uploading it to the internet. It's a world where your environment transforms as you walk through it because technology that you may not even be aware of is monitoring your every move. It's a world that's constantly changing all around us due to these sensors and the internet, and we call it the Internet of Things. Let's stroll into the living room of the future. Now, immediately, this room identifies you and taps into a cloud-based profile of preferences like climate control, music, lighting, and decor. Had a long day at work? The room knows, based on the calendar app on your phone and biosensors that detect the stress via blood pressure and heart rate. So it turns off the rockabilly surf guitar you usually listen to and switches to a more soothing classical music. From environmental sensors outside and maybe even worn within your clothing itself, it knows it was snowing earlier, so the climate control begins to crank up the heat in anticipation as you walk through the door. Now, on the software side, we're talking about algorithms that are so sophisticated, they may be able to predict what you want before you know you even wanted it. So when you walk to the refrigerator, it tells you not only what's in there, it tells you what you can make with the stuff you already have. And it's already telling you what's inside and what's the perfect meal based upon your mood, your activity level, and maybe even, well, your weight loss plan for some of us. As for how many objects could be connected to the internet, well, consider this. The latest version of Internet Protocol, IPv6, creates more potential addresses than there are atoms on the surface of the Earth. So we're going to live in a world completely filled with sensors, with data, reacting to us, changing every moment dependent upon our needs. I'm no longer going to be asking you, hey, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite music? I'm going to ask you, what's your reality like? I know what mine is when I walk into my house, how the world reacts to me, but how does it react to you? This is more than philosophy. It's more than technology. It is altering reality as we know it. And it's all regulated by the Internet of Things.
So that's something which is a little scary though, but there's some good part of it as far as technology is concerned. The regulation is something which we have to worry about, but it's going to come. It's just in India it may take a little longer, but it's going to affect for sure. And then of course technology, if you go to go to Bangalore, what you're going to see is very dramatic changes as far as new companies are being formed. So last year there's some subsidiary of 3D modeling. The company has I forgot the name of the company, which has come, which recruited over 100 students from IT just to work on 3D printers. Something completely virtual realities. These are coming up. In fact, automotive industries are absolutely gaga about such technologies. So we don't see here in Kanpur though, but it's there in some part of it. What is more important is that these particular kind of technologies are going to change economic power. I mean, that's something which we are clearly seeing, that how China is coming with that, right? Scientific leadership. And the more important thing is that it may have significant impact on the next phase of globalization. Now, which essentially means that the investment of government need to be very carefully now discussed in terms of where they should put the money. Now, if you look at the current data of China, China dominates global AI funding. It's 48%. That's a significant amount. So the other thing which is important, it seems that in order to ensure that we adopt 4IR is to know how to successfully harnessing this technology rather than trying to invent new technologies. Okay, so it's important that startups should come. It's important that all flexibility should be given in order to make sure that this technology comes in our daily forms in some way. So that's extremely important. The reason is that China is not trying to invent this technology. This is already there. It's trying to use technologies for coming with new ideas. But how ready is India as such? This is something which is there. But of course, as I said, the robots, if you look at it, we are the lowest in terms of the developing nations. 3 robots per 10,000 workers. That is the current stage. We must know where we are. Though the good thing is that the automotive industry in India is growing much better. So I'll skip this part. Yeah, here. The automotive industry is the only industry which showing significant promise. Its annual shipment for the robots have constantly increased at a healthy rate of 24%. Okay. The number of installed robots in automotive is 58 for every 10,000 workers compared to the average for other industry. So which essentially means that there is something positive which is going on. The government has also been pushing with the policy now, Make in India, that is making a lot of further impact on this manufacturing industry. But the major question or the concern which the industry has, which is also there in the NASCOM report, is basically skill sets. Okay, that is the major lacuna in the development of our growth, is the lack of skilled workforce. Okay. So it says that number of trained people that can understand the sophistication of the cutting edge robotic technology coupled with IoT and the big data is far inferior compared to some of the other developed or developing countries. Okay, that is something which this is directly taken from NASCOM report. Okay, according to this KPMG, India currently has the worst number of formally skilled workforce. So that's a big concern for us. So if you compare with South Korea formal skilled workforce is 96% of the total numbers. India is 4.7% of the total graduate. Then you have China, which is basically 24%. So basically 4% and China is 6-7 times. So it means that education has to be now bring in some form. Okay, NASCOM, what they're trying to do is they are coming with this consortium of the industry as well as some of the education system to bring this platform to train some of the already employed people. Okay, so which essentially means that this education and the skill is basically the heart of the economy. So it's beyond doubt that education, of course, is the heart. But it's vital to keep developing the skills of the current human population, current skilled laborers. You cannot just think that they are done. Now the dynamic change, you need to keep making the avenues available for them in order to reskill them. And more importantly, the education system designed for an industry economy has to be now completely changed from the system based on facts and procedures, which is what formally we do that, to knowledge, to collaboratively problem solving, and that's something which is absolutely required in the current industry. So the question is, to deliver future generation with right sets of skills and knowledge, how higher education institute would get affected, how this delivery of education requires to be transformed, and that's the major question. Okay, that how we should start thinking about it to bring these changes in our curriculum or kind of set of disciplines which we have. Now this is something which is very apt, because this I took it from this quote from this Alvin Toffler in his book Future Shock. He says that the illiterates of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn and relearn. And that's something very apt, because this is what the NASCOM report says, that of the 4.5 million people employed in the industry today, 1.5 to 2 million are expected to require reskilling in the next 4 to 5 years if they want their jobs. Okay, and the problem is too large to be handled alone, either by the academia or by industry alone. So that's why the NASCOM is recommending to come together, and that's what they're looking at Industry 4.5 as a mean to solve this problem. And if you remember a couple of, last year there was a lot of news of layoffs from Infosys and so forth. It's not layoff, it's basically asking them to reskill. They are not suitable for the needs of the industry. So what will be the jobs of the future? Okay, so if you look at the way things are changing, the jobs of the future will be the ones that machines cannot do, and it's fair to say anything that can be measured or is based on rules will be automated. I think which can be programmed should be automated. That makes sense. So what we should be focusing on for our future? We should involve in education creative endeavors. Okay, the students in general, things which can be made creative. So from basically anything from scientific discovery to creative writing, entrepreneurship, social interactions. You still will have that kind of job, okay? Because robots can't do this emotional intelligence. Physical dexterity and mobility. So these are the key things which will still remain for a longer time. Okay, these are the new jobs which are now across 8 different technologies. Okay, this I've taken from LASCOM. Virtual reality, Internet of Things, big data, artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, 3D printing, cloud computing, and these are the kind of a job roles. So it's there. It's like people, you look at and it's people asking for this kind of jobs. Now, based on this analysis, the question is what kind of curriculum changes, what kind of new things which we should do. Now, if I look back the IT industry, the major change in the curriculum was introduction of numerical methods and optimization in 1970s, 75 across. Of course, it started from IIT Kanpur, but it was across the IITs and the Education Engineering Institute. So what we should be doing in order to train or provide opportunities for our students to, address or learn these new technologies. Shouldn't we try to think of introducing data mining, machine learning, which is nothing but simple extension of the algorithms related to numerical methods in their undergraduate program? Not necessarily just give it to the computer science guy, but for all engineering students. In fact, this is relevant for humanities as well. Think from psychological point of view, it may be relevant for them also. So this is something which we must think in this direction. The other thing which I feel that the data science is becoming so important that people should know how to make use of data and analyze it. This can become a compulsory courses. Okay. The other thing which we need to do is provide options for this kind of thing for different disciplines. But more importantly, we need to work with industry. The industry, this is something which is missing here. Okay. So this is the last video which I will let you, look at it. I'll stop.
We are wondering what is happening to the world. Everything is changing.
The very idea of human being some sort of natural concept is really going to change. Our bodies will be so high-tech we won't be able to really distinguish between what's natural and what's artificial.
Inside our own heads is the most complex arrangement of matter in the known universe.
You might ask yourself, can we get to be superhumans? The original Industrial Revolution was driven by the discovery that you could use steam engines to do all kinds of interesting things.
But that was followed by additional revolutions for electricity and computers and communications technology. We're now in the early stages of the 4th Industrial Revolution, which is bringing together digital, physical, and biological systems.
One of the features of this 4th Industrial Revolution is that it doesn't change what we are doing, but it changes us.
With the ability to visualize brain activity, for example, through a simple consumer-based EEG device, it gives us access to ourselves in ways that we've never before thought possible. It unlocks the black box that is the brain and enables us to really, truly be able to realize an identity that is aspirational.
There's now a scientific foundation for the effects of mindfulness on the brain, on the genome, on biological aging, and when the human mind does know itself, then you get the potential for a new renaissance that restructures itself in terms of our relationship to life, our relationship to the planet, our relationship to work.
We need a different economic model. By that I don't mean capitalism versus communism. What I'm talking about is a shift in the system along the lines of the two big changes that happened in the 20th century, Keynesianism was a much greater focus on health and education and the role of government working with business, and then a reaction against that in late century to neoliberalism, where the focus was on free markets, freedom of the individual, and getting governments out of the way. We need to shift to a new system that will allow us to meet the basic needs of every human on the planet, that will live within planetary means, that will be fairer, and that will be focused as its key goal not on growth per se, but on maximizing human well-being. And history tells us that a values shift is triggered by creation of a new story about how we want to live.
I see the circular economy as something which fits very closely with mankind's goal to be innovative and creative and to always progress. We can use asset tracking, we can use IT, we can use 3D printing to enable this different economic model to recover materials, feed them back into the economy, and really to decouple growth from the resource constraints we have.
The reason we live in cities is not different today than it was 10,000 years ago. Even if we had got networks connecting us, we still want to have places where we meet in person. So this means the place where we work and the place where we live are much closer to each other, a city where we don't need to have big supply chains in order to produce things, where many things can be sourced locally thanks to 3D printing and robotics. So if we're able to do something to transform cities, to make it more efficient, then the impact can be huge.
Think about the prospect of getting rid of plastics. We must not only be inspired or informed by nature, but actually use natural organisms with which to design products and building parts. Only instead of varying material properties, we're varying biological functionality.
Design is critical today because it's the first signal of human intention. So the question of adding quality to quantity, it isn't a matter of simply circulating things that are potentially toxic. It's circulating things that are safe and healthy for all generations. So the goal is no longer, I want to be less bad, less monotonous, less unsafe, less unjust. It's really about a diverse, safe, healthy, and just world with clean air, clean water, clean soil, clean energy.
Together we are fighting to preserve our fragile climate from irreversible damage and devastation of unthinkable proportions.
If we think about the original Industrial Revolution, it was an energy revolution. I like to think of it as a kind of bookending of a period in human history during which we used fossil fuels, and it worked very well for us for a long time, but now we have to bring that to an end. We have energy technologies that can power our civilization: solar, wind, biomass. So then the question is, well, how do we get grid integration? Maybe the wind is blowing in Denmark, the sun is shining in Germany, and now you can move that electricity through an integrated grid. You can supply energy to everyone who needs it, and you can supply energy at all times.
Walking around, you do see different stuff, as far as like the body marriage line. They use a lot of things that help them lift up and move things to the car. You just sit there and, program something, and it has its own set mind to go ahead and do everything. And then as humans, we just come in and take the extra steps to help the technology.
It's not the cure-all for everything. There's definitely a lot of things where people perform the operation better, but certainly for the right applications, robotics are a huge improvement for the process.
The prediction of 5 million jobs lost by 2020 to technology is serious, but it's not the main question. Construction, manufacturing, services, public health and education, these industries will still exist. The main question is, what will be the future of work? How will we define work? How will we share the wealth?
From the viewpoint of the labor or jobs, now we really need a new education or new training.
We're working with a World in Motion and First Robotics, trying to encourage students from 3rd grade all the way up through the end of high school. We had students make sailboats, and then we had them race them, and so they could see how quickly they could move. And they immediately went back and started to say, oh, I saw what happened, I'm going to go change this or that. And that was 3rd graders.
I just given a prize to a kid, 18 years old, that has discovered something really very, very unique. Came up with how to get
better productivity and better yields for seeds of corn. And so he basically came with the idea that if you would perforate these seeds, you would get more food. And you think about it, you say, but he didn't go to university. So how does he get all that knowledge? And he told me, I mean, I've been watching YouTube since the age of 12, and I'm so interested that I've seen everything about it. I've read everything about it. The world is really open to learning. The thing is, how do you give the incentive to your kids to do that?
It's this ability of digital technology to change outcomes, to truly empower people all over the world that can create a more equitable growth, because I think the world needs that. Fourth Industrial Revolution has the potential to make inequalities visible and to make them less acceptable in the future, and hopefully to gather and garner political support to take the necessary decision to reduce the gap.
Humans have always been using tools, but because of the recent advances in technology, we're beginning to have machines that can augment us in all sorts of interesting ways.
I was the first person in the world to be able to voluntarily move my legs while stepping in a robot by exciting the nervous system using electrical stimulators directly onto the spine. We believe that a cure will be possible if enough of the right people have the will to fast track a cure for paralysis.
We take two things from the patient. First, we take a three-dimensional X-ray and we extract the three-dimensional data out of that so we can make a perfectly shaped puzzle piece. And then we also take a sample of fat tissue from the patient so that we can extract the stem cells out of those. And we use those stem cells with this three-dimensional scaffold that we fabricate, and after 3 weeks we have a piece of living bone that's ready for implantation.
Being able to use genome editing to understand the genetic changes that lead to cancer, and technologies like drug delivery, getting molecules into particular types of cells. There's a lot of excitement about being able to move much more quickly on this disease.
One of the things that I think is so essential to free and open societies is freedom of thought. And up until now, the conversation we've been having is around freedom of speech. Once we can access people's thoughts and access people's emotion, we have to create a space that enables people to think freely, to think divergent thoughts, to think creative thoughts. And in a society where people fear having those thoughts, the likelihood of being able to enjoy progress is significantly diminished.
We need to take responsibility at every level of society, from the individual and the personal to the institutional to the global, to adapt to these technological challenges and changes, which are redefining what it means to be human, what it means to work, what it means to be completely embedded in this world.
People always ask me if I'm an optimist or a pessimist. The technology exists, but how do we get it and implement it at the scale we need at a price that people around the world can afford?
Even though we have everyday problems we have to solve, we have to find a way to lay the foundations for the innovations of tomorrow.
All right, thank you very much for listening. We can have discussions. I think it's better that we go for tea, and subsequently there will be Professor Anand will join, and then we can have discussions on the subject.
Thank you. It was a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. It's great.
Thank you.